Are you overwhelmed by motherhood and barely keeping your head above water? Are you confused and frustrated by how all the other moms make it look so easy? You can't figure out how to manage the chaos in your mind, your home, or your family. I get you, mama. Parenting with ADHD is hard. Here is your permission slip to let go of the Pinterest-worthy visions of organization and structure fit for everyone else. Let's do life like our brains do life, creatively, lovingly, and with all our might. When we embrace who we are and how our brains work, we can figure out how to live our lives successfully and, in turn, lead our families well. At the end of the day, we just want to be good moms. But, spoiler alert, you are already a great mom. ADHD does not mean you're doomed to be a hot mess, mama. You can rewrite your story from shame spiral to success story. And I'll be right here beside you to cheer you on. Welcome to Motherhood in ADHD. Hey there, successful mama. It's your friend, Patricia Sung. Welcome to our summer best of series. Now, over the summer, I'm going to be taking a break to slow down a little bit, hang out more with my kids. I'm also managing, why am I saying slowing down? There is no slowing down. I just have to reshift priorities here. Hanging out with my kids, dealing with all of the construction project that's been going on. It has been a lot this spring, and I realized I got to let up this summer in order to be able to do all the things, shifting some stuff around. So I was like, how do I still deliver great content, but also not just do the same old, because hello, ADHD. So here's what we're doing. I am going to be sharing some friends with you. So while I will sprinkle in a couple of episodes from my own podcast, I chose some of the ones that were the most popular downloads in the last few months. But I think that they are the most popular downloaded episodes because they cover a lot of the basic things that we need to know about our ADHD, and we could use a little reminder sometimes of just the basic things. But I'm more excited about introducing you to some of my friends. I have asked several of my podcasting friends to share the interview that I did on their podcast so that you can get to know, not only you still get to hear from me about ADHD and whatever their podcast is focusing on, but that I want you to be able to meet some other really great podcast hosts. Most of these are women. Most of these are moms who are doing great things in the world. And I love what they're doing. I want to support them. And I want you to have really great podcasts in your feed that are there supporting you and showing you who you can be and bringing more light and wonderfulness and fun to your summer as you are doing your mom thing and trying to juggle all the things. So welcome to the Best of series. And let's dive into today's episode. Now, this episode is quite the deviation from the norm. You don't normally get business coach Patricia, but that's what you got today. And even though this episode is from 2021, it has a wealth of business knowledge in here. And bear with me because this is a live episode, so you got all of the liveness right in there. Today, I'd like you to meet my friend, Megan. Megan Champion is the host of the On the Hard Days podcast, where she is helping parents of neurodivergent kids have community and understand, you're not the only one. The advice that works for everybody else doesn't work for you. Yeah, come on. Let's create that community together. She also holds a special place in my heart because she too is a former teacher. And her mission is to help parents who are struggling with neurodiverse kids to feel seen and heard and understood, because her podcast is all about conversations with mostly moms, but also a few dads, and just talking to everyday moms about what's going on, what the struggles are, having a place to share, and no, you're not alone, which is kind of my thing around here too. I was lucky enough to meet Megan at Mom 2.0 in May, and let me tell you that she is just as genuine and kind and wonderful in person as she appears on social media, which is a rare breed. So please go subscribe to the Hard Days podcast. And let's jump into our conversation with Megan about how we can understand our neurodiverse kids a little bit better.
It takes a village to raise a child. We all know that, right? But what happens if you can't find your village? Because raising your child is really, really tough. What if you are so filled with shame and doubt and guilt and fear of judgment that you don't share your triumphs and your struggles? You don't talk about it because you don't think anyone can possibly relate. Well, I've been there, and it was really hard for me to find my tribe. So I decided to make mine. I went out and found these amazing mothers who are also in the trenches, struggling to raise their kids. Together, we are a community. And in this podcast on the hard days, you'll find motivating stories from other real moms who get it. We're going to accept who we are and how we show up for our children each and every day, even on the hard days. Welcome back, everybody. I'm super, super pumped for this conversation. I've been waiting a while for it. I have with me Patricia Sung, and she is the host of the Motherhood and ADHD podcast, specifically for moms who have ADHD. She's also a former teacher, and so she kind of considers herself an ADHD educator. And this is what I need right now. She is an answer to my prayers today, because this is something that I have so many questions about when trying to meet the needs of neurodiverse kids who have ADHD. So Patricia, first of all, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited. We've been trying to get this scheduled. Summer schedules are what they are. So I'm excited.
Yeah, we went back and forth for quite some time. So I'm so grateful that we were able to make it work. So tell us about you and your background.
Oh, well, so before I had my kids, I taught late elementary and middle school. I also taught a year of high school, not my thing. And when I had my boys, I decided to stay home. And as a mom who has ADHD, I was diagnosed at, I was about 20, I was in college. And so I didn't know I had it all growing up, but the signs were clearly there. I have inattentive type. And when I got to college, just the doo-doo hit the fan. It was a mess. I went from being this honor roll student, officer of all the clubs, doing all the things. And then I got to college and I literally just fell apart. And so that's how I ended up getting diagnosed. Thankfully, I was really blessed on having a doctor who understood it. I mean, looking back now, I'm pretty sure she had it herself, I'll be honest. And she directed me to all the right places and got me the right diagnosis and the student services that I needed. And that's how I was able to graduate. Because at that point, this is when you usually see ADHD show up, especially in those of us who have inattentive type, which is especially females, is that, we figured out how to make it work all this time. And then when you have some kind of big transition, whether that's a hormone transition or a life transition, all of a sudden you're thrown in this mixing bowl, and what you were doing before didn't work, which is what happened to me when I got to college. So that's how I ended up getting diagnosed. And then I figured out how to make it work. I was doing great while I was single, and while I was married, it was a little iffy there, trying to get used to being in a partnership and working with another person. But then when I had my kids, and you get all the hormones of pregnancy and postpartum, and then all of a sudden you're now responsible for, so many more things. And that's when the doo-doo hit the fan again. And I was just falling apart. And I'm on Google searching, where do I find help for ADHD moms? And there was literally 2 articles, one on Scary Mommy and one somewhere else. And that's all I could find. And I know, there are millions of us out here. How is it that I can't find anything to help me, let alone all the moms who don't even know they have this and are struggling? And so I just kind of tucked it away. And then after I had my second, he was probably, it was not even a year old. And God put on my heart of I want you to start a podcast for moms who have ADHD. And I flat out said, Lord, you have lost your mind, and I'm not doing it. I'm an introvert. I don't know how to podcast, nor did I wasn't even a podcast listener. I had to listen to a few, but it wasn't even my thing. And I spent my entire life hiding it and trying to be like everybody else. And now you want me to put it on the internet. Like, you have lost your mind. But then, I mean, very clearly, he was like, well, if not you, then who? You have the ability to explain this. You're a teacher. You have the capabilities of explaining this in a way that people can understand. And unfortunately, like, when you tell people you have ADHD, they immediately take you down a notch and they have less respect for you. So to lead with that is hard. Like, that is rough. So for the people who know me, they're like, oh, well, I didn't know that. What do you mean you have that? But for the people who don't know me and they start out with, oh, this is Patricia who has ADHD, and they have that filter, they immediately assume that I am stupid and disorganized and lazy and all the things that come with that. So it was like a huge wrestling match to figure out, like, can I live that out? Can I do that? Which clearly I listened and figured it out. And yes, that was a very lengthy answer to how did I end up here? Is that God made me and I listened.
No, I think you touched on so many important things. And I feel as well with my own podcast, I was not a podcast listener before I started mine either. My husband was, and he was like, you should totally start a podcast. I'm like, that's why, like, who on earth would listen to that? But you, like, just like you said, you start to feel that pull, because you start to realize quickly that you're filling a space that nobody else has filled. And that's how I feel as well. Same thing. And I think that it's so important that we do what we're doing, we're sharing, just bringing to light the struggles that mothers are facing for many different reasons. And so teaming up like this between the two of us is extra special for that reason. I want to ask you a whole bunch of things, but first of all, when you know what hit the fan a couple times in your life that you mentioned, do you mind describing that for us? Like, what did that look like? What were the struggles specifically that you had that you were like, okay, what is going on? And I think I need help.
Oh, that's a good question. I think the main like overarching theme is just overwhelmed. So overwhelmed with how, okay, now I'm probably gonna get teary when I start like,
it's all good, my friend.
Like, the overwhelm is so big, and it is so hard to explain to other people. It's hard to piece out, where do I even start? Because it is so big and so entangled. It's almost like, if your jewelry box gets all tangled up and you get all the necklaces in there and it's so tangled that you're like, I don't even know where to start with this. And yet it's choking me. Like imagine that necklace mess around your neck. I mean, like, I'm having trouble seeing it because it's so close to me. It's all tangled up and you have all these like bumps that get caught on each other. So as you're trying to pull them apart, they're catching on each other, and you start pulling on one thing and it creates a bigger mess over here. And it's so big and so hefty and so weighty that you don't even know where to begin. And like, to put that in a more practical sense, like when I think back to like when I had my boys, when you have ADHD, you're far more likely to have other comorbidities, which I think is like the worst word ever, but it's basically just other things come with it. Like, ADHD rarely comes by itself. It has lots of friends, and they're pretty crappy friends. So if you have ADHD, you also probably have anxiety or depression or some other kind of mental issues. You probably have dyslexia or dysgraphia. You have it comes with so many things, especially an addiction and all the domino effect of it. Like, before I would say, I might go off a little tangent here, but like, ADHD is the root. When someone has it, it is like the tree, and you have all these branches, and you have the emotional dysregulation, you have the energy dysregulation, you have the anxiety and the depression. Like, you have all these problems because you have ADHD. And when you're not treating the root, it doesn't matter how much you prune all the branches. Yeah, it might look okay, but that root is not healthy. And that is the driver for all the other problems. So many women don't get diagnosed with ADHD. They get diagnosed with depression or anxiety, and they have suicidal thoughts and all these things, but it's because they don't know that why. They don't know what the problem is. They don't know the root. And when you treat the root, a lot of those other things, not to say that they go away, but you're going to be a lot less anxious if you realize all those spinning thoughts are because you have ADHD. Your depression is going to get better because you realize, okay, I have options and there's ways that I can be successful given the situation that I'm in. And you can make different choices based on the root problem. But if you're just over here trying to feel better, quote unquote, you're never going to feel better because you didn't fix the root of the problem. So going back to the original question, how I saw that in my motherhood was I had postpartum anxiety, which I actually was not familiar with. I'd heard of postpartum depression, but I hadn't heard of postpartum anxiety. So I was having, just overwhelming, like I actually had a panic attack for the first time. I'd never had one before. I didn't even know, like I had no idea what they felt like, the suffocation and the panic that goes in that. And then I was having intrusive thoughts. So I was convinced I was going to hurt my child somehow because I'm thinking, there's something wrong with me. I'm not going to be a good mom. I'm going to somehow mess up my kid. And then trying to keep up with like all the stuff that comes with motherhood, like you're responsible for this human now. And how do you keep up with all that? It's like now you're trying to you have doctor's appointments that you have to keep up with and trying to remember all the things, and you're not sleeping well. And people with ADHD tend to have horrible sleep issues. So you're not sleeping, which is making your ADHD worse. And you're having more trouble with your memory and keeping up with everything because you're getting these like tiny stints of sleep. And you're on this, I call it like the evil Groundhog Day, because it's not just like the 24-hour cycle that Bill Murray was doing, but like a 3-hour cycle when you have a newborn, right? Like feed, eat, sleep, diaper, it just keeps going. Well, you're in this little cycle and you're like, wait, when did I feed the baby last? Did I not change the diaper? And like you start doubting yourself because you're having trouble remembering when you did all the things. So then you either turn into like lackadaisical, like, we'll figure it out, or you turn into like crazy perfectionist of like, let me get out my app and track all the things. And it was isolating because I felt like I was the only one who hated being a mom. Like I flat out thought it was awful. At 2 weeks postpartum, I looked at my husband and it was like, can we please give this baby back? I don't want this life anymore. Like I want my old life back where I enjoyed it. And here I am, like, I feel like I'm a horrible person. I'm a horrible mom. And everyone's like, yay, aren't you so excited? Like, I remember this lady was like, don't you understand how now you feel like your heart is outside of your body? And I was like, no, I don't have any connection with this blob of a human that is sucking the life out of me. And I mean, granted, like I had a really rough pregnancy. I vomited the entire 9 months. And here I was thinking like, the end is near and it's going to be so great. And I'm going to get this little baby and it's going to be awesome. And instead I was met with like all the postpartum and the hormones. And it was just like, wow, this is not what I pictured. And especially having been a teacher, I thought like, I'm the oldest of 5 kids. I was like, I'm going to be so great at this. It's going to be awesome. And it wasn't. It was awful. I hated the first few months of being a mom. And it's so isolating when you feel like you're the only one who feels that, because everyone else is like coming over with their like, oohing and eyeing. And here you are like, I think this sucks and I want to give this baby back. And to not be able to say that out loud is what makes you feel like you're alone and you're an awful person for not wanting your kid. And like part of why I share those things is I want moms to know like that is normal. Your hormones are like literally like level 57, all out of whack. Like it's not necessarily you. it's the situation. And when you have ADHD, our hormones affect us in such a different way. That's why you see when kids are going through like puberty, you'll see a lot of kids who get diagnosed in middle school, because when your hormones start kicking in, that's when all of, you know, all those changes are creating, they're highlighting what was already there. And I want moms to know that like, that is normal. There's nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. You're not alone. And if someone's not willing to say, hey, I've been there and it was awful, and like, it will get better at some point, maybe not tomorrow, but there are things you can do, and there's help out there, and there's community, then you can start to move forward. But when you're sitting there all alone, feeling like you're the only person who's, you know, this awful human who doesn't want their kid anymore, then you're not ever going to like move forward, and it's not going to get better, because you don't have any support, you don't have any help. So we have to be able to have that safe place to say, here's how I feel, because there are plenty of people that you should not say that to, because they're going to judge you and they're going to like call CPS on you. And that's not what you need. What you need is the support to be like, friend, this is normal. This is part of being a mom. They don't tell you this ahead of time, because then you wouldn't have any kids. But like this, it's okay. It's not you. You're not going to hurt your kid. Let's find you a counselor. Let's find you a therapist. Let's get you a support group. Let's get you the tools that you need so that you're not sitting there alone by yourself.
So good and so powerful. Yeah, no, I think everything that you said is so powerful and true. And I feel something similar, except obviously a slightly different topic, but it's that same idea in raising my kids, especially my really neurodiverse child, and that isolated, alone feeling like nobody understands. And I don't think I struggled with the post. Well, that's not true. I had postpartum rage, which is another beast of that. But as my son's issues started to really take place, and I felt so alone, and really like literally I couldn't tell anybody about how difficult my child was, because it was just going to come back on what I was doing wrong as a mother. I often had those feelings like, you know, he's so cute, but on the other hand, like, why my kid? Why me? Why does my kid have to struggle so much? There's those similar thoughts. And I think just motherhood in general, society does not allow for that sort of thought process to go on. And so you exposing that is so good, and important work to do. Now, when you had the postpartum anxiety stuff, how did you connect that to ADHD as a mom? Like, what was the link there where it took you from postpartum anxiety to now it's like, okay, now I'm really settling into being a mom with ADHD?
I think there wasn't necessarily like a definitive line. I think when you're struggling that hard, you have to put out whatever's most on fire first. And like I was explaining earlier, like, yes, you do have to deal with that root issue, but if one of the branches on fire, you can't just leave the branch to burn. It will take down the entire tree. So you do have to deal with, like, if you're dealing with postpartum issues, or like, you know, you have some kind of tragedy in the family and you have grief or whatever big thing is going on, you do have to deal with that first, because you can't treat everything else when something's on fire. But in the way that I was able to move forward is that I was very lucky to have a wonderful friend who had talked to me while I was pregnant and she had postpartum depression. And so since she had explained to me like what that felt like and what she was dealing with, and she had found a really great therapist a psychiatrist, and she's like, I'm doing better now. But she felt it in her heart of like, she would tell other moms and explain to them like, this is a possibility. And if you feel like that, like there's help there. So even though I didn't have postpartum depression so much, I at least was able to recognize at some point, like, oh, this is something that I can get help with. And I was able to see a psychiatrist, and I try to tell pregnant moms when I can, like, find somebody ahead of time. So if you need them, you already know who to call, because obviously when you're in that place, the thought of like trying to sort through and find a doctor when you're like trying to feed a baby and stay alive, like that's a very overwhelming. So and plus, they usually have weights. So by the time I actually like admitted this is a problem and I need help, and then finding someone who I could see who, was the right person for me, and you're sifting through insurance and all, I didn't actually see somebody until it's probably like 6 weeks postpartum, which is not ideal. So once I was able to get that part under control, then in speaking with my psychiatrist, she was like, okay, well now, let me back up a little bit. I took medicine for my ADHD in college, but I was not very well educated about it. I didn't really understand how it worked, and I wouldn't recommend doing the method that I did. And then I was not using medication all the way until after I had my boys. And then I realized like I do want to have extra help. So in the process, we sorted out some medicine and got me back on track. And that's when I was realizing like, okay, this is bigger than I realized. Like, I think that's one of the hard parts of being diagnosed with ADHD is, a lot of people will say like, wow, that's so great, you've known so long. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? This was the year 2000 and people did not know what they know now. And they didn't explain it in the way that they explain it now. The tools were not there. Like, it wasn't necessarily like that significant of a like advantage. Like the knowledge that we have now is not the knowledge we had then. The tools we have now are not the tools that we had then. And being able to, like, while I'm glad I already knew I had ADHD, I definitely was not equipped in the way that I am now. Like that, my oldest is now 6.5. So, I've had the last 6 years, I have deeply delved into understanding my brain and what works for me and understanding how ADHD works. So while I spent 20 years working on it, I didn't own it until the last 6 years. And that's when, once I figured out like, okay, this is how my brain works. This is what I need. And it's not what most other people need. It's not what's going to work for everybody else. That's when I really could turn around and say, okay, now I need to work on this part of me and figure out what it is that, how do you live well with ADHD as a mom in the year, 2021? It's different.
Yeah. And years ago, I searched for a group of mothers who might understand what I was going through in raising my out-of-the-box kid, and I came up empty-handed. Instead of strengthening my resolve and digging deeper, I gave up and came to the conclusion the group doesn't exist because I'm doing something wrong. Those feelings of shame, guilt, and doubt stayed with me for years, eventually leading me to create the support group community I wished I always had, which then led to instant friendships. These are mothers who don't need you to explain it. They get it. And now, my support group community, Mothers Together, is thriving. We hold small group, personalized virtual meetings weekly and catch up on our struggles and wins over the last week. We leave resources and questions for each other on our off of social media private forum, and we even attend virtual live Q&As with expert therapists, OTs, educators, and more. If you haven't yet found your people who not only understand what you're going through, but also can completely relate, Mothers Together is for you. If you're looking for lifelong friendships in a judgment-free, personalized space for weeks, months, or years to come, Mothers Together is for you. Mothers Together opens its doors on the 1st of every month, but sign-ups start the week before. Head on over to ontheharddays.com/motherstogether to get more information, read testimonials, and sign up. Still have questions after you check out the page? Send me an email at ontheharddays@gmail.com or DM me on Facebook or Instagram, and I'd be happy to chat with you personally. I don't want you to ever feel the way that I felt, which was alone, anxious, and depressed. Your people do exist. They're looking for you, too, and you'll find them in Mothers Together. Visit ontheharddays.com/motherstogether for more. Now, back to the episode. I'm wondering about that. First of all, before I get into that, your boys are, you said 6.5 and
So yeah, 6.5, and the other one just turned 4.
4. Yeah. Are you paying attention, like hyper vigilant on seeing signs of ADHD in your kids?
Yeah, that was one thing. I mean, I was so worried about when I had them. I feel like with my oldest, I was literally like putting him under a microscope and being like, was that it? Was that it? Did that happen? What could that be a sign? And I would say my advice to moms would be like, don't stress about it. It's either there or it's not. This is the way that we were born, and stressing out about it and worrying about it does not change your kid. So there's no point in me being that worried about it, because it's not like I caused it, or I mean technically the gamma gene, slow paralysis, but it's like, it's not because I parented a certain way, or because I waited too long between feedings or something. Like, there's nothing that we do that causes this. Like, this is the way that our brains are created. This is the way that we were born, and it's going to be there. My guess would be that both my boys have it. We haven't gone through the formal diagnosis process, but I mean, I know my people. I can spot them in the grocery store. I can,
Well, that's actually, I want to know about that, but you just said something and I want to make sure I comment on it. And you said, this is not your fault. You're born with this. It has nothing to do with the way you parent. And I was like my little light bulbs went off in my head, because it has taken us, my son is 8, and he never received an ADHD diagnosis, but the behaviors and the meltdowns and the anger and all the things just have been around since he was a baby. And finally, my pediatrician was like, okay, it sounds like it's time for medication. And long story short, he's taking ADHD medication. It has completely changed him. So I'm going to go ahead and say that he has ADHD, and we are more than 100% sure that my husband is undiagnosed ADHD. And now I'm starting to think that my daughter and my youngest son also have ADHD. But when it comes to the whole blaming mothers thing, you might see a child, and obviously I know there's the hyperactivity, there's inattentiveness, there's the combined, there's all these different pieces to it. But we judge so easily when we see a child, quote unquote, misbehaving, or as a teacher, you've got that kid who can't sit still and is up and out of the seat and never raising their hand and their mouth's just going. And it's so hard, because maybe, is it possible that sometimes tough behaviors that we see from children are due to, I don't know, not parenting well? Like, I don't even want to say that, because who parents well? Like, I don't.
So I guess, let me do my disclaimer, is that ADHD is a neurological medical condition. This is the way that our brains were created, and there's nothing you can do to make your brain a different way, in terms of like, yes, there are some people that have ADHD because they were in a car accident or had some kind of head injury. But generally speaking, this is the way we were born. Now, keep in mind that the way that you treat your child, the way that you implement, how do I want to word this? Like, the way that you help them, or the way that you support them, or the way that you are giving them consequences, all of those things will help or exacerbate symptoms. But it's not changing the fact that I have ADHD. But like, if you feed me a bunch of sugar, you better bet your rear it's going to be a hot mess. If I don't get enough sleep, watch out. There are things that I know, if I don't take good care of myself, or I don't make sure that my kids go to bed on time, there will be hell to pay in the morning. So do my actions as a parent affect my child? Oh, heck yes, they do. But it's not like, it doesn't indicate the condition. You're just sending like on a different path of like, are we going to set this child up for success, or are we setting them up to like have horrible self-worth and need therapy the rest of their lives? Well, you know what, we probably all need therapy. So but like, our actions as a parent are extremely influential. They're not causing a medical diagnosis. They are making a difference in does this look successful or is this detrimental to your child?
So with that being said, then how should I, because I need help. I'm waving the flag, like, help me. How should I support my children and my husband in this journey of ADHD in our home? It looks different for each kid. It looks different for my husband.
Mm-hmm.
And I am a recovering perfectionist, sort of type A teacher, the teacher stereotype of a teacher. Mm-hmm. Yep. Introvert as well. And, organized. And I got my own issues, but ADHD is not one of them. I am recovering from always thinking about, why can't my husband just? Why can't my son mm-hmm. just? Now I'm on to my daughter, who's the newest one that I'm thinking about a lot. Why can't she just? And removing that, okay, all right, I see. It's not what I thought. I've been trying to, quote unquote, change them. That's not working. So I'm ready to accept. Arms are open. What do I do? What do I do in my parenting, in my motherhood, to support my kids in this? Do you know what I mean? Like, mm-hmm. what would you recommend for moms who don't have ADHD, or I suppose even if they do?
Yeah. So I guess first, I like what you said. You're saying everybody's ADHD is different. I always call it like the marinara sauce. Yes, everyone who has ADHD has the marinara sauce of, they have tomatoes. They probably have some kind of protein, meat, doesn't have to. And you're going to have kind of the same flavor profile, but everyone's different. If you ask 10 Italian grandmas how to make the right marinara, you're going to get 10 different answers, and they all think theirs is the right one. So when you look at everyone's ADHD, they're all different. They have the same tenets. So you're going to see that executive dysfunction, the emotional regulation issues. I really hate the name attention deficit disorder. It is not a deficit of attention. It is that I have way too much attention. Everything's interesting. It all comes in at the same volume, and there's no prioritization or filter to, like, my brain doesn't automatically tell me what's important and what's not. So, if you think about it, like from your kid's perspective, like, can you imagine everything coming in at you at volume 10? It's all important. It's all loud, and they're supposed to filter out your voice in the chaos. Imagine you're in Times Square and you're like, let's do some math homework. No, like, it's so loud. How do I tune out the taxis and the moving billboards and the people and the noise and the lights? Like, how do I tune that all out and focus on what I'm doing? It's all at volume 10 all the time. So everyone's different, but we all have some core items that are the same. So yes, that's one of the hard parts, is that everybody's different. Everyone's going to need different things. Like, some people might have a fairly decent working memory, but their emotional regulation is awful. And then other people are like, I can't remember what I said 3 seconds ago, but you know what? I can usually hold it together when somebody makes me angry. It depends over time, not only just your brain, but what skills you have learned over time. What have you learned is okay and not okay? Some people have, like, for me, I would say, like, on the outside, it looks like I have fairly decent emotional regulation, because I learned, like, I can't just, like, lose my effing mind, and, like, that's going to get a harsh judgment from others. But inside, it's still a mess. I'm just not showing it. So I was like, oh my, this is such a big question. I could talk on it for like 400 years.
No,
so
you're doing great.
It is different for everyone. And that's the hard part, is that not everybody's going to need the same things. But when it comes down to learning about, like, to be successful, I always use my 3 tenets. The first one is learning about your ADHD or your child's ADHD. So it's not just learning about ADHD as a whole, but understanding them as an individual. What does that look like for them? What do they need? What do they do well in? What do they need help with? That's one section. Then 2 is putting on your oxygen mask first. Like, mom has to take care of herself. You cannot take care of the rest of the family if you're not taking care of you. You are an integral part of the family. If you are not taking care of you, you are not taking care of the family. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So you have to be sure that you're doing what you need to stay healthy, what you need to be supported, because you can't do all the things, first of all, and you can't do them all even halfway well if you're not well. And then the third part is asking for help and figuring out what it is that you need or your child needs and getting that support for specifically what they need. So number one, learning about not only just ADHD, but the person's specific recipe. Two, making sure that we're taking care of the people as a whole. And then three, finding the right support that they need. And one of the things that, like, I love what you said was like, that, why can't they just do fill in the blank? Like, just, that word just used in that sentence right there is one of the things I hate the most. Because whenever we say, why can't you just do this to our child? They don't know why they can't do that. They are trying. Like, that is like, if I can take, like, if anyone can take away just like one thing from today, is that as hard as it is as a mother to take care of your child with these struggles, imagine how hard it is to actually have the struggles. If you think about the last time that you were going through something hard, like, you know, maybe you like lost somebody really important to you and you're going through that grief stage. Who is it harder for? You who lost that person who's really important to you, or say your spouse who's trying to help you work through that? Who is it harder for? So whatever level of hard you are dealing with, multiply it by 100, and that's what your kid's going through. They are not trying to drive you insane. They wish that they could just push the button and be like, I just did exactly what mom asked me to do. Like, there's so many times I have said that. I mean, even with my husband, I'm like, if I could have done that, I would. Like, do you know what I would give to be able to just do the thing that I'm trying to do? Like, I cannot put into words how much I wish I could, quote unquote, just do something. It is so frustrating when, especially with most people, like with ADHD, like, we know what we need to do. We might even know how to get there, but to actually like go down the path is somehow so hard. And there's 43 reasons why, but understanding that your kid is not doing it on purpose. They are not trying to drive you insane. They are not trying to purposefully disobey you. Like, they are struggling. And whatever you can do to support them matters. Every little bit that you're doing matters. Even when you feel like you're being a totally crappy mom, it matters. Like, the fact that they see you trying to do what's best for them, it matters. They see that, even if they don't fully understand it, even when they're only like, you know, 3 and 4 years old and they don't fully understand what's going on. Like, they see your body language and they feel your words just as much as they hear them. And like, not to say that like, you shouldn't feel frustrated. Like, yeah, it drives me insane when I have told my kids 16 times to put their shoes on and they're like over out in left field. But we have to figure out a way, and like, this is on us as moms, is how do we balance supporting our kids, but also finding a healthy way to support ourselves when we're ready to be like, I literally just want to throw you out the window. You're driving me insane. Like, that's why we have to take care of ourselves, because I'm not saying it's not frustrating. I'm not saying it's not hard. It is hard. But I think one of the hardest parts about having ADHD is that you feel most of the time like you're the one that's broken and you're the one who can't get it together and you're the one who's carrying that burden and you don't know what to do about it. So it is on us as moms to pour in, like, for every time like you get frustrated at them and yell at them, because it's going to happen, is that, okay, what can I do to repair that? What can I do to build them up? What can I do to show them how they're an amazing kiddo that has, you know, whatever their like amazing skills are? How do I reinforce that? Because the rest of the world is looking at them and saying, that kid in the grocery store isn't listening, isn't misbehaving. Like, kids notice. They know when that old lady in the grocery store is giving them the side eye. They know. So it's like we're carrying extra weight of pouring even more, I don't want to just say positivity, because it's not about like toxic positivity, but like building them up. For every time they get knocked down, we need to help them find ways to build up. And And it also can't be solely on us. Like, we have to teach them the skills for them to be able to do it themselves. We've got to put them in activities where they can excel. We have to find places where they are welcome and they are treated with dignity and respect so that they can feel successful, because there are going to be so many times when they don't. And that's, to me, one of the hardest parts of having ADHD, is not letting my self-worth be determined by my failures.
That was really good. That was really powerful. I jotted a few things down because what you're saying rings true in my head. I hear you. A lot of when you were talking actually before was making me think of my husband, and my kids aren't even, I mean, they're still young, but he says, he's a very jokey guy, and he often comes
usually
in.
One of our defense mechanisms.
Totally. And he quotes movies and he quotes songs randomly, and it just comes out all the time. His whole life. I've been with him for a very long time. And he'll often, come home after work or something, and he just starts spewing off this or this or this or this. And I will laugh, and he'll say, yeah, my filter. I'm like, is your filter on? And he's like, this is on. I'm this 97% of what's in my head right now, you don't even hear. Mm-hmm. I'm just letting out little bits, and I'm going, oh my gosh, that's a lot of noise. And I'm like sensory processing with sound. Noise drives me bonkers. So gosh, we're two peas in a pod. I'm trying, luckily there's a lot of laughter and joking around it, but I see that big time. So what about for mothers who are listening, who have children who are undiagnosed? So they don't know that it's ADHD, but everything you're describing is like, well, it could be. How do you then know if it is quote unquote, challenging behavior or ADHD? How do you know? Because if we know our kids have ADHD, look, my son just started medication for it. If I had known this about him years ago, I wonder if I would have come from a totally different angle of more empathy, which should have been there, but it wasn't, and less, why can't you? So what about these moms whose kids are not diagnosed right now? How do they know if they're supposed to support or lay down the law, so to speak? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of like the mysteries of motherhood, of like, how do we turn our kids into great people and find that balance between support and boundaries? And it really takes looking at your child and studying them almost like a science experiment.
Mama, are you ready to get away? You are cordially invited to this year's annual retreat. Our Successful as a Mother luxury weekend getaway retreat conference amazingness that is happening this October. This is a chance for you to get away and take a break and truly rest. For you to learn about your brain in a way that makes sense for you. And most importantly, know that you are not alone and have a real life community of moms who get you. We are staying at a beautiful 4-star hotel. This is an all-inclusive event, which means I will handle everything for you once you arrive. I take care of your hotel. I take care of your meals, that you neither cooked nor cleaned up, nor cut anybody else's food up, that you truly get to have a weekend where you take care of you, because you deserve rest. You deserve to be taken care of. And I'm going to do that for you at this retreat. So I invite you to go ahead and grab your ticket at patriciasung.com/ADHD-mom-retreat. Again, that's patriciasung.com/ADHD-mom-retreat. Grab your ticket and let's hang out in person. I cannot wait to meet you.
One of the things we did, we met with I don't know if you follow her. I just adore her. Dr. Anne-Louise Lockhart. We met with her as a parent coach. She's on Instagram if you want to follow her. Yeah. So we met with her as a parent coach, not as because she also does, I'm pretty sure she's a psychiatrist. She might be a psychologist, but I think she's a psychiatrist. I'm not 100% sure. She sees patients as a doctor, but she also does parent coaching. And you can't do both. Like, you either have to be one or the other. And she had us fill out this chart basically of like when we were really struggling when my younger one was like probably about like 2 or 3. He was just having a lot of meltdowns. And this chart had like we had to write down, like we had to do our homework of when he was having a meltdown. It was like, here's the date and the time, here's who was there, here's what happened beforehand, here's what the trigger was, here's what we did. Is there anything like any kind of like obvious like aha things? And we did this homework for like 2 weeks of writing down anytime he had a meltdown, and then we were able to go back and see the pattern. And it was anytime he was extremely tired or hungry, which also is me.
Yes,
I'm a beast when I am tired or hungry.
Same, but that's my son. That is my son.
And once you saw like, oh, okay, well, that's something I can fix. Like when we would go through the preschool drop off, like pickup line, like I would just literally hand him a granola bar and I wouldn't wait to get him home to eat. Or like if I knew we had to run an errand, I can delay with a little snack. Or it was like beeline home, because otherwise he was going to have a meltdown in between school and the house. And we live literally like 3 minutes from the preschool. Excuse me. So that's an easy thing. I just need to hand you a snack until we can get to lunch. Or no joke, I have alarms set on my phone that at 10:30, my kids need a snack. Because if we get all the way to lunch and they haven't eaten, it is meltdown city trying to get through lunch. So that's where I, as a parent, can solve that issue. It's not that my kid doesn't want to eat lunch. It's that I waited too long to give them food. I am in charge of the food. 2-year-olds are not in charge of food. So that's on me. I can make sure that that doesn't happen. Also making sure that we got to nap on time. I mean, granted, he's not napping now, he's 4, but making sure that I'm a little bit regimented about schedules, because I know that my kids don't do well if they are hungry or tired. It doesn't necessarily matter what time it happened. It matters what the lapse of time is. Like, it doesn't matter that we didn't eat exactly at 12:02, but it matters that we haven't eaten in 5 hours. So we need something for our blood sugar. So in that way, when you study your child like a science experiment, you can start to see the patterns, and you will see, is it something that's in their control or not in their control? Because him being tired and hungry is not in his control. That's on me as the grown-up. Whereas if you go through the pattern and you look at all, and it's like, well, I noticed that all of these meltdowns are happening when they're not getting what they want, or like some kind of like choice on them, then that's like, okay, now I need behavior strategies. Now I need to figure out what's the strategy where my kid will do better in this situation. And that's when boundaries and consequences matter more. So that would be my advice, is that when you gather that data, which again, when you have ADHD is like, oh my goodness, now I got to write stuff down. Are you kidding me? But when it's a big enough problem, you will remember to write the thing down. So I printed out the thing. I had it sitting on the kitchen table. So I saw it every day. I was sure where when that problem happened, because it was a problem when that tantrum happened. And I've also since learned the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. I didn't realize the difference. That's an important thing. Tantrum versus meltdown. Meltdown is when your kid like literally just can't handle things, and they are like, think about melting down. Like they are withering from the core and they cannot handle things. A tantrum is when they're mad, they're not getting what they want. That is part of life. And we do need to teach our kids how to work through those things. But that's 2 different things. So when you determine whether a kid is having tantrums or meltdowns, then you know what action we need to do. And like what you were saying of like, should we be laying down the law? Yes and no. We need to lay down the boundaries. Our kids need that consistency. They need to know what is okay and what's not okay. Like that's part of us making them and helping them turn into like a nice human being, is them understanding where the boundaries are. Laying down the law generally is not what ADHD kids need. A lot of them have oppositional defiance disorders where like, you can't tell me what to do, and whatever you said, like in that way, like, again, now that's on me. How do I get my kid to do something when they're not going to do it if I told them to do it? There are strategies for that, of working with those behaviors. It's not necessarily my area of expertise, but I've got some. So I won't go like too far down that tangent, but there are, what works for 90 to 95% of kids is lovely. And that is not what you need if your kid has ADHD. So throw all those books in the trash and find someone who understands your kid. We are not like most other people, and that is okay. But we have to find the systems that work for us, not what works for everyone else. So yes, what works for the other 9 kids nearby, lovely for them. I have the 1 out of 10 that's not going to work for. So don't go ask your friend with the angel what they do, because the angel probably, let's be honest, your friend did not make that angel. That is not their wonderful parenting skills. They got a lovely cooperative child. Those exist out there. Most of us who are listening to this podcast probably didn't get that kid, or maybe we got one, and you know,
that's a no.
One and one of the other. But just know that, like, don't feel bad because those things didn't work for your kid. Know that they're not for your kid. Like, just like, you know, like my podcast is not for everyone. I can't be everything for everyone. I'm specifically serving moms who have ADHD. So another mom listening is probably listening who like doesn't have ADHD, would listen and be like, wow, Patricia's got a lot of problems. I don't have those. Like they're not identifying and like figuring out what, like how this helps them. I'm not speaking to them. I'm speaking to the moms who are like me. So find the people who understand your kid. Find a support group of moms who have kids like yours and ask them what they do, because they also might be like, oh, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But at least you feel like you're not alone. Whereas if you find the people that understand your kid, that's where you're going to get advice that's worth trying and going to make some headway. And like, not to say that everything that works for neurotypical kids will not work for neurodiverse kids. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like, if you're over here comparing yourself to, you know, Pinterest mom with her chore charts and her sticker charts, like, okay, I won't get on my tangent about sticker charts because I kind of hate them, but like, that's not necessarily what's going to work for a kid with ADHD. They don't remember that they were trying to get 10 stickers. They already forgot about the 10 stickers until they walked by it and saw it. And they're like, oh, I really did want that prize. And they'll go do the thing right now because they wanted it. But in 10 minutes, they already forgot about it again because they're on to something else. And so while the sticker chart works great for those kids, what our kids need is something different. They need that visual reminder. So if you're working on something, how do I have not the sticker chart on the thing they might see once a day? Where's the visual they're going to see multiple times a day, or wherever it is that you're trying to solve that behavior? If you're trying to solve a behavior in the playroom because siblings keep fighting, what's the visual you put there? Don't put it in the kitchen. They're not fighting in the kitchen. Put it in the playroom. This is where you're having the issue. So it's about figuring out what makes sense for your kid and your family and your situation.
You are everything I needed today and more, because that's what I'm currently struggling with as a mom. First of all, I come from the teacher background, right? And so it's sticker charts up the wazoo. And it's like, you know, I used that at first, and I cannot tell you the anxiety that caused my son to have those sort of charts, because if he just had one mistake or whatever one time, instead of finding it motivating, like a neurotypical kid may think, oh, I'm just going to work harder next time. Yeah, right. Total absolute mayhem, because now it wouldn't be perfect. And so forget it. So we've tried that in past years. Again, I feel like I'm just now learning my kids. So let's take something as simple as
wait, let me stop you there, because I don't want you to beat yourself up for not knowing what you didn't know back then. Like, that's not fair for us to do that to ourselves, because what could we have done then? We didn't know. Like, just like I look back and I'm like, I didn't, when my son was first born, like, I didn't know how to be a mom. I didn't know that what I was going through is normal. And for a long time, I like kicked myself in the butt thinking I'm a horrible person. No, like, what? There's no way I could have done something different given the situation I was in, because if I could have, I would have. So we do have to forgive ourselves for how the past went. And what matters now is that now you are listening to this podcast to figure out how your kid works. Like now you are doing the work and you will figure it out and you will make progress. But like, I don't want moms to feel like, oh, I'm such a horrible mom because I didn't know before. Like, yeah, sure. We all wish that we were better at the beginning, but like we were just starting out. And like, think about, if you were in a job and it's, your first year of teaching, you're like, oh man, I messed up so much stuff. like it's your first year on the job, you don't know. But when you get, farther along and you're getting to know your son, like figuring out the way that he ticks. And like, when you get in there and like get into the details of who he is, like that's where the good stuff is. And you'll figure out what makes sense for him. So like, you're on the right path and like, just lean into that rather than kicking yourself for what happened before, because we can't change that.
I appreciate that. And that's true. That's again, there's the recovering like perfectionist mom. When I look at what makes my son tick and I really analyze it, it's not the same as what makes my daughter and my other son and my husband tick. Everybody is so different, like you said. So I feel overwhelmed. I almost feel like I'm the person responsible for coming up with systems in our home that will work for them rather than them coming up with it themselves. And my husband, he's obviously been, this is his whole life. So he's figured out his own little coping things, but like, let's just take something like getting ready for bed or cleaning up. Those are two hard areas. The avoidance from my children is severe, I would say. But avoidance can also just be sort of a kid thing to do because they don't want to go to bed. But this is like,
right.
My son hyper focuses. I literally the other day I was like, okay, he needs a timer. Let's try a timer. I put my phone in front of him, like right in front of him as he hyper fixates on building Legos. That's his thing. So much so that he wants to skip meals and I can't tear him away at bedtime, which leads to meltdowns and all of these things. So the timer is right in front of him. I tell him the timer's there. I make sure that he knows the timer's there. Okay. He says, no, doesn't see the timer. Timer goes off. What do you mean it's time to be done? I'm like, what could I have done differently to help him? But that's also something totally different for my daughter and different for my other son, who's more hyperactive. I'm feeling overwhelmed and lost on helping everybody in my house be successful. So I don't know what I'm asking for from you, but I'm just letting you know that I'm struggling with that.
No, and that's normal. Like, you're one person and you don't have all the answers. And it is not your job to make everybody happy. Like, that's okay. Like, it's not going to be perfect and it's not your job to make it perfect all the time. It's not. And when we let go of that guilt and that like weight of the responsibility, it gets a little bit easier. And it really is like a trial and error. You don't know until you give it a try. And that, I think that's one of the hardest parts about parenting is like, there's no instruction manual, and what works for this kid doesn't work for that kid. Even when kids are similar, it doesn't necessarily work. Like it's frustrating. Like, mostly I just want to be like, yes, that is hard and it is frustrating and it's a lot. And so where I'd go from there is like, what's on fire? What part of the day do you need to tackle first? Let go of all the other junk. You can only fix one thing at a time. And especially with kids with ADHD, like if you try to change all the things at one time, it's too overwhelming. We can't handle it. I can't handle that. Like, that's too much. So just one thing at a time. So what stuck out to me when you were saying about like cleaning up and bedtime is that my husband does this to me. Like when he tells, like, I'll be working on my podcast, after the kids go to bed, and he'll be like, hey, it's time for bed. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm coming. And my brain says that, but like, it doesn't register in my mind that like, I need to be wrapping up. And part of that onus is on me because I have to be aware that that's an issue. But that also means that I need to do something different. So I'm working really hard on not working on my podcast at night because it's really hard for me to tear myself away for something that I love so much. So like right before bed is probably not a good time to do Legos because it's not a good time and it's going to cause the meltdown. And at that point, everybody's tired, everybody's grumpy, and you know there's going to be a meltdown. So it's like, okay, then we may just have to have a rule that Legos don't happen after dinner, which stinks, but is like what's worse, just doing Legos earlier in the day or having the meltdown at bedtime? So I want you to know, like when he says like, there is like a part of our brain that will respond to things and they don't actually like enter the system. It's like they just like floated right on by. And it's not that he's ignoring you. It like literally like it just kind of like bounced off his head and went out. Like I wish there was like a way I could explain it. Mm-hmm. But so what I tell my husband, which he's like, this is ridiculous, I can't believe you're asking me to do this. But it's like you have to like walk over and like somehow touch them and their eyes have to meet yours. And you look them in the eye and you're like, we have to wrap up in just a few minutes. And putting this timer here. When it goes off, we have to finish. And you have to tear their eyes away long enough that like the hyper focus can like pause to let the information enter. And they're going to be mad about it. I'm going to be mad about it. Like, don't make me stop this thing I really like doing. But otherwise it doesn't go in. And like we have to like tear them away long enough to get that recognition and the eye contact of like, okay. That's not to say that they're going to be okay with it in 5 minutes when the timer goes off. But if we didn't even like, if the like timer happening didn't register, that makes the meltdown later worse. Whereas if the timer registers and they're like, okay, got it, I have 5 minutes. And then the timer goes off. At that point, it's a different kind of interaction because they know this was the timer. It's not a surprise. If it's meltdown of a surprise, like, what do you mean it's time to stop? That's a different interaction than, oh, I'm so mad, I really wanted to keep doing this. And the way that we interact with them is different because surprise, they feel like almost like, why are you punishing me? I was doing something and I'm successful at this. Why are you making me stop the thing I'm good at? I'm having fun. I feel good when I do this. Why are you stopping me from feeling good? That's a different conversation than, oh, but I really wanted to do this thing. Like I don't know if that's making any sense. I wish I had better words to explain it.
No.
So it's in that moment, like, that becomes more of like a training issue of your kids know, I heard the timer begin, I heard the timer end, and that's where it's like consistency. And no, like, I'm not going to do 2 more minutes, because then they do just 2 more minutes, 2 more minutes, please 2 more minutes. And they're like, oh, okay, you can do 2 more. So they know what happens is we set the timer, it goes 5 minutes, then I get another 2 minutes. So you're creating this new habit of now we can do 2 more or 1 more, or whatever, and it just drags it out. So we do have to be very consistent. Like, kids with ADHD are very black and white, as are the grownups. And so when you tell me that it's a 5-minute timer, it has to be a 5-minute timer. It can't be a 5 plus a 2 plus a 3. Like, no, it has to be a 5-minute timer, because I'm always going to push the bounds to keep doing the thing that I love doing. So it has to be that consistency of like, if you want to do 7 minutes, then just say 7 minutes. Don't do 5 plus 2. Just say we're gonna do a 7-minute timer, and then you have to cut it off. Every time we do, and I'm guilty of this, where I'm like, okay, fine, 1 more show, because I don't feel like getting off. Like that, yes, we all do it. But we have to remember that, like, we're creating we're building those neural pathways for them. So we need them to know, like, timer goes off, that's the end. Or whatever your signal is, whether or not it's, timer or something else, that has to be the end. And you're going to have a big fight the first day, the second day. And depending on your ADHD kid, it might be day 17 that you're still having that fight. But what matters is that you're being persistent about it. And I always tell like moms with ADHD, like we don't have to be consistent because that's really hard for us, but we do have to be persistent. So if you mess up one day and you do the extra timer, okay, we'll do better tomorrow. And then, but we stick with it, because a lot of times with ADHD, you know, they always say this like, oh, 21 days to build a habit. One, that's not true. People do not learn things in 21 days. Regular people. People with ADHD need even longer than that. It actually, I mean, of course, I don't remember the exact timing, but I think it's something crazy like 40 or 50 days for us to like create that habit when we have ADHD. So yes, on day 17, you might still be having that meltdown, but know that eventually you will get there. Like if this is important to you, you have to have that conversation with yourself beforehand or with your spouse of like, is this the boundary we're setting? Okay. Like we need to know that this is really what we want to do, because we're in it for the long haul. We're going to be having this argument for a while. So you're going to have to stick with it for a while. Like the example I gave is like when we finish dinner, our kids have to clear the table. One of my kids picked it up right away. He knows as soon as he's finished, he cleans up and he's on his way. The other one, I kid you not, we had arguments about clearing the table. I feel like it was like 4 or 5 months. Every day. I don't want to clean my dishes. You know, like, and the whole thing, like, this is the expectation. You have to clean up after yourself. That's part of contributing to this family. So we're picking up the dishes. And it was so long to get that habit instilled, but we got there eventually. Are there days where he still runs off before he does it? Sure, but I don't pick up that plate. Hey, you need to come back here, clear your dishes. You can't do other fun things until you get this done. And we have to just keep pushing through. And yes, in your house, you might be like, well, you know what? That is not worth a 6-month battle. I'm out. But something else might be worth that 6-month battle. So you have to figure out what makes sense for your family too.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow. Okay, so in the cleaning up example with the timer, you said it's going to look different when the timer, if I've gotten through to him and he sees the timer and he hears the timer and he knows it's time and now it's a meltdown, or maybe it's a tantrum. What do I do with that? Is that just quote unquote like typical kid behavior of defiance? Or is there something that I should keep in mind on how to handle that second part of actually getting up and walking away?
Again, it's going to depend on your child's personality, because you need to be firm, but you also don't want to get sucked in to a secondary battle. So like, for example, if you're like, fine, I'm taking the Legos away, and you grab all the Legos and you scoop them up, and now they're like yanking on you, trying to get all the Legos back. Now you've diverted into a secondary battle. Are they going to bed? No, they won. They got a different battle and they're not going to bed. So in their mind, this worked out great because they're not going to bed. So it really depends on your kid as to what, and again, trial and error, what is it that's going to make the difference? I would say like one thing that I tend to do is I just repeat the instructions and then I wait. When you have ADHD, especially when they're younger, kids have a slower processing. So like when you say something, you have to count like 1,000, 2, 1,000, and then it enters their brain. It takes them a while to like think of the instructions. And so a lot of times we're already there giving more instructions before they actually process the first set of instructions. Wow. And I equate it to like when you're on your computer and you keep clicking on stuff because you're mad at it, and the computer, like the little like spinny ball of death keeps going because you keep giving it instructions and it hasn't caught up yet. It's like all you're doing is you're creating more problems because you keep giving instructions and they haven't figured out the first set yet. So it's like you have to like it is time to stop the Legos. We need to like it may be that this isn't a cleanup time. This is just we walk away from Legos and we go to bed.
Yes.
I need you. It's time to stand up. And I'm trying to work on getting that out of my vocabulary because they don't really care what we need. Okay. So it's like it's time to stand up and go to bed. And then you wait. 1,000, 2, 1,000, and you give them a chance to decide. And then I just say it again after like 5 seconds. It's time to stand up and go to bed. it's time to stand up and go to bed. And like, you have to like wait. I mean, I'm not waiting that long because I'm not gonna leave a bunch of dead air, but like you have to give them that time. And it feels to us like the grown up, it feels like we're waiting forever. Like when you think about it, it's time to stand up and go to bed. 1,000, 2,000. Give them a chance to decide. Are they going to decide? Repeat the instruction.
Wow.
That feels like 100 years when you're angry at your kid and you just want them to go to bed.
It feels like defiance too.
Give them time.
Yeah, it feels like defiance as well. Like
Right.
they're purposely, how many times do we repeat ourselves? You know, like we're caught between the whole, like, I shouldn't have to say this more than once or maybe even twice. But like, if you're on time number 3 or 4, how long do you let that go on?
But, and again, it depends on your kid. Like if this is the first time you're implementing it, this is going to be a long transition for you. Like ADHD doesn't do well with transitions in the first place, but you're trying to instill a new transition. Like, wait, I'll be here a while. So give them a chance to figure out how this is going to work. Oh, mom is very serious about this. We are in fact standing up and going to bed right now. Like this isn't going to be like, they stood up and walked away. That's not going to happen on time 1. We have to expect that this is going to be, you know, it could be like a 10-minute thing to get them out of the playroom and over to the bathroom to brush teeth. But when you go in with the expectation of, this is going to take us the next 10 minutes, I probably should start earlier in order to get to bed on time because we're going to be here a minute. Then we have so much more patience than when we go in and expect our kid to just follow directions and go. Like, they're not a robot. So why are we expecting them to do that? And I like how I'm saying all these things and I'm like, I need to listen to these. I need to listen to my own advice. And so like, please don't take me as, I do all these things all the time. There's plenty of times I call her Medusa mom at bedtime. Medusa mom comes out with like all the snakes, like, I told you to get in your bed. Like, oh, good. Like that happens. So, but it's like, it takes a lot of planning on our part as like the mom of like, I'm implementing this new transition. This is what I'm going to do. If my child does this, I'm going to do this. If they do this, I'm going to do this. And then you get in there and they actually did, they went Route 73 and you didn't plan for Route 73. Like, okay, well, now I'm going to have to think of a plan 73. But when we go into it knowing this transition is going to take us a while, eventually with the persistence factor, you will get to the point where they know the timer went off. It's time for me to stand up and go and do my thing. And that might be also where you're like, okay, hey, Legos just aren't a bedtime activity. Instead, maybe we need to do, some book reading and do Legos right after school when they need to like decompress. And, a lot of times kids with ADHD, like they need that time to decompress. And depending on whether you're more hyperactive or inattentive, it might look like running around like a gerbil in a hamster wheel. It might look like, please don't talk to me ever again, actually just for like 10 minutes. So that might be something you want to move, and it's calculated. And here you are, the mom, the master of puppeteer, moving the day around. It's a lot. But when we get all those pieces in place, one, our kids change and then we got to change again. But it makes a difference overall. It's just, it feels like you're not making any headway, but know that you are. It just takes a long time.
You are just gold. I could easily talk to you all day. You're saying things I'm just thinking about so much and what I want to do. One of the things is, traditional calling from the other room. I'm in the kitchen, they're in the living room. Hey guys, yeah, wrong. Like there we go.
I did not hear one thing you said. Just, I am not ignoring you. It did not register. Yeah, especially if I'm into what I'm doing.
My son will say that. He'll say, I did not hear you. He is
and he really didn't. Like, no. I want you to know, like, he truly did not hear you. Yeah. It lit, like, I consider it like just kind of like it like bounces off your head and like didn't even enter your brain. Like, don't take it personally. It is like ADHD is not about you. And, when children want to do well, what's that saying?
Children always want to do well, I think.
Right? Children do well when they can.
They do well when they can.
They're not purposefully ignoring, like,
no.
Yes, sometimes they purposely ignore you because they want to keep doing what they're doing. But when you really study your kid and watch their reaction and you know your kid, you can tell the difference between when they really did hear you and they're ignoring you and when they truly didn't. Like, you will know, but you have to study them to get to the point where you can recognize it. Because like, as a teacher, I'm pretty good at kids' tells. Like, if you think about like playing poker, like I can tell when a kid is really like BSing me, or when they're truly like, I don't remember that fact. Like, yes, there are a few kids, like when they get to like high school, that can con you, but like when they're sub 10, they don't have that skill level of like, you know, I'm trying to think of like a famous con artist. Of course, can't think of one right now. Like, they don't have that skill. They can't do it. So they're not, like, if they're lying to you, it's usually pretty easy to tell, but you have to study them. Like, you get to know them and you will know the difference between, is this defiance or is this them not being able to be successful here?
I think of just my daughter every time. I've been noticing, and I told her, but every time I give her an instruction and she hears me. So ADHD in girls, I know, can look different than boys, or at least that's what I've heard. But for her,
it does. It looks extremely different.
And that's, maybe we can quickly unpack that, but she'll hear me. So that's not the problem. And I'll say, you know, whatever, come into the kitchen. We're going to get ready to go upstairs, whatever. She says, okay, she hears me. She stands up, she gets distracted. And it's typically by petting our dog every time. And like 10 times a day, bends down. Oh, look at the puppy. She gets down, starts petting. And it looks like avoidance so that she doesn't have to do the task because she doesn't want to. But I'm wondering how much is literally she just got distracted. And she'll say, I'm distracted right now. But it's like, but you're always distracted, and it's only with the dog, and it's only when I'm telling you to do something. You know, how that's where I struggle in understanding what to do in those moments. That's hard for me.
Well, and those are skills that we have to teach our kids, is that if you know you are going to get distracted by the dog every time you pass by, and you're supposed to be doing, take the clothes upstairs. Like, as a grown-up, I repeat things to myself so I don't get distracted. Like, that's one of the things my kids always laugh at me at breakfast. I'm like, yogurt and pancakes, yogurt and pancakes, yogurt and pancakes, making yogurt and pancakes. Like, otherwise I turn around, I'm like, what did you want for breakfast? I don't remember. And they're like, I just told you, Mom, I want yogurt. And the other one's like, I said pancakes. And like, I have to like repeat it in my head because I'm going to get distracted.
Yeah.
So like for her, it's like, you know, that's a skill you can teach her of like, okay, when you stood up to put the clothes upstairs, you may have to repeat yourself. Taking my clothes upstairs, taking my clothes up the stairs, like whatever. If it's a song, if it's like make it into a rhythm, if it's just saying it, like that way, if she starts playing the dog, she's like, oh no, taking my clothes. Like that's a life skill. I mean, because you know what? All people forget to do things. All people want to pet a fluffy dog. Well, not all of them, but most of them. But that's, if you see that's where the pattern's happening, it's like, okay, what strategies can we employ to overcome that specific thing? So clearly, it's when you're supposed to be doing a chore and you pass by the dog. Do you like, is the dog always with you? Are you purposely walking past the dog because you love him so much? Like, is she purposely ignoring you? Yeah, it's possible, but there's probably a good way to be like, well, then maybe you shouldn't pass through the kitchen where the dog is. You need to go straight upstairs. And that, you know, those are skills that they'll use their whole life as they, you know, can extrapolate it and pull it into different situations.
This is so good and helpful. I want to give you a chance to share what you know, a little bit more about your podcast and where listeners can find you and connect with you, because many of them may want to reach out and say hi as well.
Of course. So I have the Motherhood and ADHD podcast, and you can find it on any of whatever your favorite podcast app is. It'll be there. And my website is motherhoodandadhd.com. I teach classes for moms to learn how to get their crap together and organize their day. So Whether that's figuring out your calendar and to-do list and how to create like the foundation of your day, or starting in September, I'm teaching a class on figuring out daily routines and how to structure your day so that it runs more smoothly. I would love to have you in there. We meet weekly also, like we have like a weekly support group, so that as you're implementing these things, I don't want you to feel like you're stuck. So we have a weekly group where we meet, you can ask questions, you can meet other moms who think like you and get the support that you need so that you actually implement the stuff that makes a difference in your day. It's not just theory or talk, like we make things happen, because you can be successful when you have ADHD. It's just a matter of figuring out what are the systems and structures that make sense for your brain, and then how do you overcome the obstacles that we know we're going to run into because we have ADHD, and preparing for those and setting ourselves up for success. It is very possible to live a really great life with ADHD. It comes with its fair share of struggles for sure, but it is possible. And I want to help as many moms out there as possible to do that. So again, Motherhood and ADHD is the website, the podcast, my Instagram handle, wherever you want to find me.
Mm-hmm. Such a gift that you are doing this, such important work. Like I'm literally cutting us off, but not because I don't have 5,000 other things to ask you. So maybe we have to come back for a round two.
Walked by and he's like, "Are you done yet?"
I know, but it's just so good. So I just want to thank you truly for joining me today, for giving all the wisdom and really tangible, like there's a lot of takeaways here, but also just an overview on just understanding and accepting ADHD just in general. So all of it has just been such a gift. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, I get a little fired up when I talk about ADHD, and I want you, the listener, to know you are doing a great job. It is hard. Being a mom is hard. Having neurodiverse kids is hard. Being here I go. I'm like, this shows my brain is like, and you're done, Patricia. Having a neurodiverse brain is hard, but you are doing a great job. Keep on trucking. You will get there, and you'll see the fruit of all the labor that you're putting in eventually. Maybe not tomorrow, but eventually.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening today. If you would like to talk with me personally, where we can chat and just get to know each other like old friends, I would love to do a discovery call with you. Go to my website, ontheharddays.com, and click on Schedule a Call. And if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, please do so that you get the latest when they roll out. Not to mention, please leave a review if you feel like this episode spoke to you. That way, the podcast will be shown to more mothers. And finally, you can find me on Instagram at ontheharddays with dots in between each word, or in my free Facebook community, On the Hard Days Podcast and Community. If you are feeling isolated in your parenting journey, I encourage you to reach out through any of these means so that I can connect you with your people and support you in whatever way you need.
For more resources, classes, and community, head over to my website, motherhoodinadhd.com.